When Evan arrived at my home in Bellevue, the sky outside had darkened into the muted blue of late evening, the kind of color Elena always loved. He stepped through the doorway with a seriousness that chilled me to the bone, and for a moment I felt as though the walls of the home we built together were shrinking around us. He placed his briefcase on the dining table, opened it slowly, and pulled out a stack of documents so large it made my stomach turn. He spoke in a calm, measured voice, but the weight in his tone was unmistakable. "Michael, I need you to prepare yourself before I explain what is happening. Your son and daughter-in-law have filed a petition with the Superior Court. Their names are on this document, Caleb Turner and Marissa Turner. They are requesting full guardianship over you on the grounds that you are no longer mentally competent." For a moment, everything inside me stopped. The sound of the refrigerator humming seemed louder. The ticking clock above the kitchen doorway suddenly felt like a blade dragging slowly against stone. I stared at Evan, waiting for him to smirk, to say this was some kind of misunderstanding, but he did not. His eyes held mine with firm sympathy, the kind lawyers master only after years of witnessing the worst parts of human nature. "I am sorry to bring this to you," he said quietly, "but I cannot soften the reality. They are accusing you of cognitive decline, and they are not simply suggesting it, they are attempting to prove it." He slid the first set of papers toward me. I hesitated before touching them, as if the ink itself was contaminated. When I finally forced myself to look, my breath caught. There were photographs of me at a hardware store, frozen mid-step as I stared at the shelves. I remembered that moment, remembered thinking how strange it felt to shop alone after decades of doing those errands with Elena. But here, the image had been reframed as evidence of confusion. Another page showed a note from a doctor I trusted, stating that I had mixed up my medications. A moment from months earlier that had nothing to do with memory loss and everything to do with grief and distraction. There was even a transcript of a recorded conversation in which I forgot my zip code. I blinked at the page, my fingertips trembling. That conversation had taken place on a morning when I had barely slept. Caleb and Marissa had stopped by unannounced, arguing about a school issue with the twins. I had been exhausted and overwhelmed. Now that moment had been carved into a weapon. "Why would they do this, Evan?" I asked, my voice cracking like thin ice under too much weight. Evan opened another document, one with a summary of my financial profile. "I have reviewed your full estate. Your home is worth approximately $2.1 million. Your retirement investments total $1.6 million. Your savings and pension bring the total to a sum that is unfortunately tempting to anyone under financial strain." Those words cut deeper than any deliberate insult. Tempting. As if my life's work, my sacrifices, my careful planning for a future Elena and I never got to share, were reduced to a number. Evan continued, explaining that Caleb and Marissa were facing intense financial pressure. Their luxury home carried a suffocating mortgage. Their marketing business had recently collapsed. The children's private school tuition was overdue. Their credit accounts were bleeding. "They have a motive," he concluded plainly, "and from what I can tell, they have been preparing for months." My heart sank into a heaviness I could not describe. Caleb, the boy I raised alone after Elena's health declined. Caleb, whose scraped knees I bandaged, whose college applications I stayed up late to help complete. I remembered the first time he held his newborn twins, the joy in his eyes. How could that boy grow into the man who would do this to me? I pressed a shaking hand against my forehead, trying to steady my thoughts. Evan looked at me with gentle restraint. "Michael, I know this is painful, but you need to understand the truth before we can fight it." And that was the moment I realized this was only the beginning. Evan reached back into his briefcase and withdrew another set of documents, this time arranged in careful chronological order. The neatness of the stack contradicted the chaos it represented. As he laid them out one by one, it became clear that what I was looking at was not spontaneous concern from a loving son. It was a timeline of calculated preparation, stretching back almost a full year. Every page contained a moment of my life, twisted into something unrecognizable. "This first entry," Evan said as he tapped the top sheet, "is from 11 months ago. Caleb reported that you confused the mail carrier by asking twice whether he had delivered the correct envelope. Does that ring a bell?" I nodded slowly. I remembered that morning, The envelope had been from the insurance company, and it had the wrong last name printed on it. I asked again, only because the mistake surprised me. I had not been confused. I had been careful. But in their petition, the moment was rewritten as a symptom of cognitive deterioration. Another entry, Evan continued, comes from a neighborhood barbecue you attended last spring. According to the statement submitted, you repeated the same story twice, within 15 minutes. I frowned. I knew exactly the story I had told. It was about the time Elena and I had taken Caleb to the ocean for the first time. I had told the story once to a group of neighbors, and later a visiting couple asked about the photo displayed on my phone wallpaper. I told them the same memory, but with different details. That small repetition was now labeled problematic. The deeper Evan went, the more bile rose in my throat. There were notes about me hesitating before unlocking my car door. Notes about me misplacing a grocery list. Notes about a missed callback to a dentist appointment. All mundane elements of human life turned into manufactured evidence. The reality settled over me like a suffocating blanket. My son and his wife had been watching me, evaluating me, waiting for the smallest moment they could weaponize. Evan sighed and leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled in front of him. Michael, most of these patterns are meaningless. They happen to everyone. But Caleb and Marissa have carefully framed each one to support their claim, and they have paired these observations with their own sworn statements, alleging that you often appear lost or forgetful when they visit. Lost or forgetful. The word struck me like a physical blow. I remembered the nights after Elena died, when the house was too silent and the memories too loud. I remembered spacing out in the kitchen or pausing on the stairs as grief washed over me unexpectedly. But that was not confusion. That was mourning. And mourning is not incompetence. I rubbed my eyes, trying to chase away the sting of betrayal. Evan continued, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was unfolding. There is more. Caleb has been positioning himself as your primary caretaker in conversations with neighbors and extended family. Several of them submitted letters describing moments when he said he was worried about your memory or that you seemed disoriented. From their perspective, they were supporting a concerned son. But he orchestrated their impressions. He fed them specific anecdotes. The narrative he built has been circulating behind your back for months. The weight of those words settled into my chest. So it was not only documents and recordings. It was whispered concerns, stories told at dinner tables, impressions shaped quietly and consistently until the people around me believed a version of me that did not exist. Why would he do this so thoroughly? I asked softly, barely hearing my own voice. Evan folded his hands. Because they wanted the petition to appear credible the moment it landed in court. They knew that timing was everything. And Michael, I have reason to believe the dinner invitation you received this week is part of the plan. They likely intended to present you with documents disguised as routine paperwork or record another staged moment of confusion. I felt a cold tremor run through me. The thought that Caleb would deliberately set a trap for me, that he would arrange an incident to further paint me as incompetent, made my skin crawl. Every memory of recent months aligned into a horrifying pattern. Caleb insisting on coming to my doctor appointments, Marissa hovering around me at family gatherings, the forced concern in their voices, the way they always seemed to be watching. They were not caring for me. They were collecting me. And for the first time, I understood that this betrayal was deeper and more premeditated than I had ever imagined. Evan straightened the papers before him, as if preparing to shift from the language of revelation to the language of strategy. His expression sharpened into something resolute, the look of a man ready to wage a legal battle without hesitation. I sat across from him, still stunned, still raw, but for the first time since he stepped into my house, I felt a thin thread of determination winding its way through the shock. Michael, the only way to win this is to be methodical, he said, and I need you to follow everything I tell you without deviation. Your son has spent nearly a year building a narrative of decline. Now we have to build the truth. He took out a clean notebook with lined pages and placed it gently in front of me. Begin writing down your activities every day. Note the time you wake up, the meals you make, the errands you run, the conversations you have. Write down each decision you make and what prompted it. Do not skip a day. We need an unbroken timeline that shows clarity and competency. I opened the notebook, ran my fingers across the first blank page, and felt an ache rise in my chest. Elena used to buy me notebooks for every birthday, claiming a man should never let his mind go unwritten. It was a small comfort to feel her presence in the simple texture of paper. What else do I need to do? I asked quietly. A full cognitive evaluation, Evan replied. Not from your family doctor. He is already too entangled in Caleb's narrative. I have arranged an independent appointment with a geriatric psychiatrist. Her name is Dr. Veronica Hale. She is one of the most respected specialists in the state. If you are as mentally sharp as I believe you are, she will document it in a formal assessment that holds weight in court. The name settled over me like a promise. I had always prided myself on keeping my mind active, even after retirement. Puzzles in the morning, books in the evening, volunteer engineering projects for community centers. Losing Elena had shaken me, but it had not broken me, and I was determined to prove it. There is one more thing, Evan said, leaning forward. You must act normal around Caleb and Marissa. They cannot suspect that we know what they have done. If they sense even a hint of resistance, they may accelerate their plans or try to provoke you into a reaction they can twist into evidence. Speak to them as you normally do. Be warm, be agreeable. And if they ask you to sign anything, tell them you want time to read it carefully. Do not sign a single sheet of paper. My stomach tightened at the thought of pretending everything was fine, pretending love where betrayal had taken root. But I nodded. I will do whatever is necessary. Good. Evan began organizing his materials. I know this is painful, but you must understand that staying calm is part of the strategy. Their greatest weapon is the narrative they built about your instability. If you remain composed, we dismantle it. The next morning, I began the journal. I wrote down the exact time I woke up, the breakfast I cooked, the crossword puzzle I solved. I recorded the minutes I spent tending the small herb garden Elena planted behind the kitchen. Every entry felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Caleb had tried to take. Later that week, I met Dr. Hale in her peaceful office overlooking a quiet pond. She greeted me with a steady handshake and an expression free of judgment. Over 3 sessions, she tested everything from memory recall to reasoning puzzles to situational problem solving. She asked about my routines, my relationships, my grief. At the end of the 3rd session, she closed her notebook and looked at me with an expression of certainty. Mr. Turner, she said, there is no sign of cognitive decline. Your memory is strong. Your reasoning is sharp. Your emotional responses are appropriate to your life experiences. In fact, your cognitive performance would be commendable in someone 20 years younger. Relief washed over me like warm sunlight breaking through weeks of storm. But even with that comfort, the hardest part was still ahead. Caleb called me that evening. His voice was soft, practiced, the kind that once would have comforted me. He apologized again for missing our family dinner. He suggested we reschedule soon. Then, casually, he added that he and Marissa wanted to talk about my estate plans. Just routine preparation, he said. Nothing urgent. As he spoke, I listened with steady politeness, the way Evan instructed. I told Caleb I was open to the conversation. I told him we could talk soon. I used all my strength to keep my voice calm. But inside me, something stronger than fear began to rise. A quiet fury. A resolve I had not felt in years. A promise to myself that this battle was far from over. 3 days after my call with Caleb, I was sitting in the kitchen journaling when I heard hurried footsteps on my front porch. They were too light to belong to an adult, too fast to belong to someone calm. Before I could stand, the doorbell rang 3 times in quick succession. When I opened the door, my granddaughter Lily stood there, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her breathing uneven, like she had run the whole way. "Grandpa, can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling in a way I had not heard since she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. I stepped aside immediately, helping her inside as she pulled the hood of her sweatshirt tighter around her face. The moment the door closed, she burst into tears. "Lily, what happened?" I asked, guiding her gently toward the kitchen table. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. I have to show you something, but you have to promise not to tell my parents I gave this to you. They will be furious. They might even kick me out. But I heard something. Something I was not supposed to hear. And I recorded it because I did not know what else to do. My heart thudded in my chest as I watched her unlock the phone. Her fingers hovered for a moment before she tapped a file titled Kitchen Conversation. She pressed play, then placed the phone on the table between us. The air in the room thickened instantly. Caleb's voice filled the kitchen. He sounded cold, controlled, and frighteningly certain. Once the court grants guardianship, we list the lake house immediately. The market is strong enough. We can clear a couple million within the first few months. Marissa's voice followed, lighter but edged with calculation. And after we sell the house, we liquidate his retirement accounts. That alone will clear the rest of our debts. Then we can finally stabilize our finances and start fresh. Besides, the memory care center in Riverbrook said they have an open room. He will be comfortable there. My breath caught in my throat. Riverbrook was nearly an hour away, designed for patients with advanced dementia. They were planning to move me like a piece of furniture. Lily looked away, unable to meet my eyes as the recording continued. Caleb spoke again, sounding impatient. He will not understand what is happening. He is already so scattered. Once he is settled in the facility, everything becomes simpler. The lawyers will handle the rest. Then Marissa's voice dropped to a whisper that felt like ice against my spine. And once he is out of the way, we can finally breathe again. Lily paused the recording before the next words could play. Tears streaked her cheeks as she pressed her palms against her face. I am so sorry, Grandpa. I should not have recorded them, but I was upstairs doing homework and I heard them arguing. They said your name. They were talking like you were already gone. I felt sick. I did not know who to tell. I did not know what they would do if they found out. So I came to you, because I cannot let them hurt you. For a moment, I could not speak. Not because of the betrayal in the recording, but because of the bravery sitting across from me. A 16-year-old girl who risked everything to protect me. I reached across the table, took her trembling hands in mine, and held them tightly. You did the right thing, Lily. You did something many adults cannot bring themselves to do. You told the truth. Her tears fell harder. She leaned forward and hugged me, her small shoulders shaking against mine. I closed my eyes and let the moments settle around us, grief and gratitude braided together like two strands of the same cord. When Lily finally calmed enough to breathe steadily, I called Evan. His voice sharpened the moment he heard the first few seconds of the recording. When the file finished, he remained silent for several long beats. Michael, he said at last, this changes everything. This is not just a defense anymore. This is clear evidence of intent. They discuss selling your home, moving you against your will, and using your assets to cover their debts. This is exploitation in its purest form. What do we do? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. We go on the offense, Evan replied. We file a counterclaim for fraud and attempted financial exploitation, and we use this recording as the centerpiece of the case. As I ended the call, I looked at Lily, who was still watching me with wide, frightened eyes. Grandpa, what is going to happen now? I exhaled slowly, feeling a new strength settle in my chest. Now, sweetheart, we fight. And this time, we fight with the truth on our side. Evan arrived at my house early the next morning, carrying a folder so thick it looked like it had been assembled through a sleepless night. He took a seat at the dining table and opened it without saying a word. Lily sat beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the shape of something powerful forming around us. Not just defense, not just fear. A strategy, a battle line. We start by compiling every piece of evidence, Evan said, sliding documents toward me one by one. Your journal entries, medical evaluations, volunteer records, receipts, emails, everything that confirms your daily clarity. Dr. Hale's report will be a key pillar, and the recording Lily captured will serve as undeniable proof of intent. He lifted a printed transcript of the recording, the words highlighted in bold paragraphs. Reading them on paper made them feel even more brutal. Cold sentences, calculations, plans to erase my autonomy with signatures and legal filings. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep listening as Evan continued. This case will not simply be about disproving their claims. It will be about revealing why they made them. Judges do not take guardianship petitions lightly. The moment the truth becomes visible, Caleb and Marissa's petition collapses under its own weight. He leaned back, folding his hands carefully, as though he were choosing his next words with precision. Michael, there is something else you need to know. While preparing the counterclaim, I began reviewing their financial patterns. What I found is worse than I expected. He took out a separate stack of papers, each marked with dates and transaction summaries. These are private loans Caleb took out 6 months ago. He used projected inheritance as financial backing. Loans this large are rarely approved without some sort of collateral. In this case, he presented your estate as future guaranteed assets. My stomach turned. So he had been planning this long before he even mentioned being worried about my health. Evan nodded grimly. And there is more. 3 real estate agents have been contacted by Marissa over the past 2 months. She asked them hypothetical questions about selling your lake house quickly and whether buyers in the area were aggressive enough to purchase within a narrow time frame. It was all disguised as casual inquiry, but it aligns exactly with the plan outlined in the recording. I felt Lily tense beside me. She looked horrified, but more than that, she looked angry. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Evan continued flipping through the documents until he reached one that he held slightly longer than the others. And then there is this email. He slid it toward me. It was addressed to an unknown financial consultant. The subject line read, Future Liquidation Strategy for Immediate Funds. Inside the email, Caleb asked how quickly assets could be moved once guardianship was confirmed and whether transferring property titles would raise suspicion. I stared at the words until the letters blurred. It struck me that my son had been planning to dismantle my life piece by piece with a calmness that bordered on cruelty. He had sat in my kitchen just months ago, eating the soup I made, smiling, calling me dad, while writing emails about how to remove me from my own home. Lily grabbed my hand. Grandpa, I cannot believe they did this. They were ready to throw you away like you did not matter. Her voice cracked, and for a moment I felt like the roles had reversed, like I was the one comforting a child who had seen too much too soon. I turned to Evan. What happens now? He gave a single, decisive nod. Now we prepare for war. I will file the counterclaim today. Fraud, financial exploitation, intent to mislead the court. We will request immediate court review of the recording, and we will push for a restraining order to protect you from any further manipulation. The weight of his words settled over the room. Not fear this time, but something steadier, something like resolve. Evan closed the folder and stood. Michael, this will not be a simple battle. They will fight back because they are desperate. But we have truth, documentation, medical proof, and the recording. That is more than enough to expose everything they built. I nodded, feeling an unfamiliar strength rise within me. For months, they had been shaping a narrative meant to bury me. But now, the truth was rising like a tide they could not escape. As Evan prepared to leave, he looked at me with a kind of quiet respect. The hearing will change everything, but you are not going into it alone. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled deeply, Lily still beside me. She rested her head lightly on my shoulder. Grandpa, she whispered, I am with you, all the way through this. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed we could win. The morning of the hearing arrived with a pale gray sky stretched over the city, the kind of muted light that made everything feel suspended in time. I barely slept the night before. Lily had curled up on the sofa across from me, refusing to leave my side, insisting that she would be there in the courtroom even if she was not allowed to speak. When Evan arrived to pick us up, he looked calm, composed, and frighteningly ready. He carried only a single leather folder with him, and somehow that made the tension worse. Everything we were fighting for was inside that folder. We pulled up to the Superior Court building, its stone columns towering above us like silent judges waiting to decide fate. As we stepped inside, the cold air of the hallway wrapped around me. I saw Caleb and Marissa almost immediately. They stood with their attorney near the benches, dressed immaculately as if attending a gala rather than the hearing that would determine the future of my life. Caleb glanced our way. For a fleeting second, guilt flickered in his eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by a stony determination. The judge, Honorable Rebecca Lang, entered with a deliberate stride that commanded the room. She took her seat and surveyed the courtroom with the focus of someone who had spent years watching people lie to her. When her eyes landed on me, something softened. Then she turned to the attorneys. We will begin with the petition filed by Mr. Caleb Turner and Mrs. Marissa Turner, requesting full guardianship over Mr. Michael Turner. Caleb's attorney rose first. He was polished, confident, and delivered his words with rehearsed sincerity. Your Honor, my clients have acted out of love and concern. They have watched Mr. Turner struggle with memory lapses, confusion in public spaces, disorientation regarding his finances, and increasing difficulty managing his daily affairs. They wish to ensure his safety and financial stability before irreversible harm occurs. He presented the photographs, the doctor's note, the recorded zip code incident, and the written testimonies from neighbors. Each item, twisted and framed, felt like a stone thrown directly at me. I kept my face steady, just as Evan advised. When the attorney finished, the judge turned to Evan. Mr. Parker, you may respond. Evan stood calmly, as if he had been waiting his entire career for this moment. Your Honor, what you have seen thus far is not evidence of decline. It is evidence of manipulation. It is evidence of individuals attempting to take advantage of a man who has managed his life with clarity and dignity. He presented Dr. Hale's evaluation, the 30-page report detailing my cognitive strength. He read passages aloud, letting the words ring through the room. The judge listened with growing interest. Then Evan placed my journal on the table. These entries show consistent daily functioning, coherent decision-making, volunteer work, problem-solving, and clear memory recall. Every page reinforces the truth. Mr. Turner is fully capable. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. Marissa looked toward the exit as though planning an escape. But Evan was not finished. Your Honor, the core question is not whether Mr. Turner is competent. It is why the petitioners wish to declare him incompetent. And that brings us to the true heart of this case. He lifted the transcript of Lily's recording. This is a conversation between the petitioners, captured unintentionally by their daughter, who was upstairs doing homework. She was not coerced. She was not coached. She came forward because she feared for her grandfather's safety. Caleb leapt to his feet. That recording is illegal. It violates privacy laws. It cannot be. Judge Lang raised a hand sharply. Sit down. I will decide what is admissible. Evan pressed play. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as Caleb and Marissa's voices spilled into the air, discussing selling my home, liquidating my accounts, and placing me in a memory care facility. Their tones were unmistakably cold, calculated, businesslike. Each sentence sliced through the courtroom like a blade. When the recording ended, the judge's face had changed completely. She leaned forward, her voice steady but colder than ice. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, would you like to explain why you were discussing financial gains and placement of your father in a facility before any evaluation had been completed? Caleb stammered. Marissa wiped her eyes. Their attorney tried to intervene, but the judge silenced him. I have seen elder exploitation many times. This is one of the clearest cases I have encountered. She picked up her gavel. The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. A protective order is issued immediately. Furthermore, this matter will be referred to the county prosecutor for review of potential criminal charges. The gavel struck the bench. The sound echoed like justice finally arriving. The moment the gavel struck, it felt as though something inside me loosened for the first time in months. Not happiness, not triumph. Something quieter. Something like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath underwater far too long. Caleb and Marissa stood frozen at their table, their faces pale with the realization that the world they tried to construct had collapsed in front of a courtroom full of witnesses. Lily squeezed my hand with both of hers, her grip firm with relief and fear and hope all woven together. Evan gently guided us toward the exit. whispering that the judge's ruling was stronger than he had even expected. Outside the courtroom, news cameras were already gathering in the hallway for unrelated cases, their lights flickering through the glass like distant lightning. As we stepped past them, Caleb called out my name, his voice cracking. "Dad, wait, please." I turned slowly, not out of desire, but out of instinct, the instinct that still remembered the boy he once was. His face was red, his eyes wide, and for a moment I saw the frightened child who used to crawl into my lap when nightmares woke him. But then I remembered the recording, the lies, the emails, the plans to erase my autonomy as if it were a simple business transaction. There was nothing left to say. I looked at him without anger, without softness, without any of the illusions I had allowed myself to hold on to for so long. "Take responsibility for what you did." Caleb opened his mouth to respond, but Marissa tugged his arm sharply, pulling him away as though she feared the weight of the truth might shatter her composure entirely. Evan placed a hand on my shoulder. "You do not owe them anything now. You walk forward. Let them deal with the consequences they brought upon themselves." That afternoon, we returned home in silence. Lily sat beside me on the couch, curling her legs under her as she stared at the framed photograph of Elena on the mantel. I knew she was thinking about family, about the meaning of loyalty, about what it meant to choose truth over comfort. "Grandpa," she said softly, "do you think they will ever apologize?" I exhaled slowly, looking at the photograph myself. "Your father and mother chose a path they cannot easily walk back from. But an apology means very little if it arrives only after consequences. I do not know what they will do, but I know what we can do. We build something better." 2 days later, the prosecutor contacted Evan. The investigation was officially open. Caleb and Marissa were charged with attempted financial exploitation and filing fraudulent statements to the court. Months dragged on with hearings and interviews. Though they avoided jail time, they accepted a plea agreement that left them with suspended sentences, mandatory financial restitution to cover all legal costs, and a permanent record marking what they had tried to do. Their reputation in the community crumbled rapidly. Friends became distant. Business contacts withdrew. Their immaculate house in Lakeview Ridge, once a symbol of status, now echoed with the quiet collapse of lives built on dishonesty. Meanwhile, Lily's situation deteriorated at home. After the hearing, Caleb and Marissa grew cold toward her, not shouting or striking her, but shutting her out entirely. They blamed her for the recording, for the exposure, for the unraveling of their plan. One evening, she arrived at my door with a small suitcase and puffy eyes. "They told me to leave," she whispered. "They said I betrayed them. They said I chose you over them." I knelt before her, pulled her into my arms, and felt her breath shake against my shoulder. "You did not betray anyone, Lily. You protected someone who loves you. You did what was right, even when it was hard. That is courage. That is integrity." From that moment forward, Lily lived with me. The house, once filled only with memories and the echo of Elena's laugh, began to breathe again with warmth and routine. We ate breakfast together, walked by the lake, and rebuilt the garden Elena once nurtured. Lily planted new flowers and vegetables with a determination that reminded me of her grandmother's spirit. Some nights, she cried quietly, mourning the loss of parents who had chosen ambition over love. On those nights, I sat beside her, not offering hollow reassurances, but offering presence, the steady presence of someone who would never abandon her. Months passed, and slowly, healing found its way into the corners of the house. Life did not return to how it had been before the betrayal. It grew into something new, something honest, something built on the simple truth that family is defined not by blood, but by loyalty, integrity, and the courage to protect one another when everything falls apart. The seasons shifted quietly around the house in Bellevue, marking the slow passage of time as Lily and I settled into a rhythm that neither of us had anticipated but both of us desperately needed. Winter loosened its grip, spring brought new color to the garden, and for the first time since Elena passed, the house no longer felt like a museum of memories. It felt alive again, not because the past had faded, but because something new was growing in its place. Each morning, I found Lily sitting at the kitchen table before school, drinking tea and flipping through her textbooks with determination. She had changed since the trial. There was still hurt in her eyes, still confusion about how parents could choose greed over love, but there was strength in her too. A quiet, emerging strength that reminded me of her grandmother, who had faced life's hardest storms with a calm resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the lake, Lily and I stood in the backyard, examining the new sapling we had planted together. Its branches were thin and young, reaching upward as if craving light. We had chosen it to honor Elena, a symbol of renewal rather than grief. "Grandpa," Lily said softly, "do you ever regret fighting them?" The question settled in the air like a feather drifting downward. I looked out over the shimmering reflection of the sky on the lake, remembering the courtroom, the betrayal, the quiet devastation of losing a son to ambition. "No," I said at last. "I regret what they chose, not what I did. Protecting yourself is not betrayal, it is survival. And sometimes, survival is the bravest thing a person can do." Lily nodded, absorbing the answer in that thoughtful way she had developed. She reached out and touched the small sapling, her fingers brushing the leaves as gently as if it were a living piece of Elena herself. "Do you think my parents will ever change?" she asked. "People can always change," I replied. "But change is a choice, and they are not ready to choose it yet. All we can do is live in a way that honors the truth. We cannot drag anyone toward the life they should live. We can only live our own with honesty." She leaned against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. In that moment, I understood that family is not something fixed by blood, but something shaped by loyalty, trust, and the courage to stand for what is right. Lily had lost a mother and father in all but name, but she had found a home within these walls, and in caring for her, I had found a purpose I thought had left with Elena. As twilight deepened, I whispered the words I knew both of us needed. "We are not broken, Lily. We are beginning again." And beneath the soft rustling of the young tree, it felt true. If life teaches anything, it is that trust must be protected with vigilance. The people closest to us can sometimes be the ones who test our resilience the most. When someone tries to strip away your autonomy for their own gain, it is not selfish to fight back. It is an act of self-respect. Your worth is not measured by your age, by your assets, or by the narratives others create about you. It is measured by the truth you stand on and the courage you show when others try to make you small. And for those who expect inheritance as entitlement, remember this: a parent's life is not a prize to claim, it is a bond to protect. When greed becomes stronger than love, the loss is far greater than money. It is the loss of character. In the end, integrity is the only inheritance that truly matters.